Sometimes the loudest sound in the world is a single wrong word. Imagine the cold shiver running down your spine, the heat burning your face, the feeling of all eyes in the room turning into needles pricking your skin. Shut up. 2 words. That's all it took for a young woman's entire world to crumble. What if your deepest passion was met with such brutality? Before we continue, tell me what city, what corner of the world you are watching us from. The journey we are about to embark on today is about a girl who was silenced in the cruelest way possible, but whose brilliant mind found a way to scream so loud that it made the world stop and listen. Subscribe now, because you need to witness the twist that fate has in store for her. This time, the outburst does not come from a father or mother but from an older brother. Alex watched his sister Nina from across the kitchen table. She was quiet, which was not unusual, but this was a different kind of silence. It wasn't the silence of concentration he knew so well when she was immersed in her science projects, building circuits or observing patterns on tree leaves. This was a hollow, fragile silence, like an empty shell. Her project for the science fair had been her life for the past 3 months. A study of bioluminescence in fungi, how they create their own light. Nina loved light in all its forms. She filled notebooks and notebooks with drawings, equations, and observations. For her, science wasn't a subject. It was a form of poetry. Alex saw the passion in her eyes, a glow that reflected the glow of the fungi she studied. The humiliation happened during the preliminary presentation in class. When Nina got excited about a subject, she spoke quickly, jumping from one idea to another in a web of associations that, to those who didn't know her, could seem chaotic. She wasn't being disrespectful. She was overflowing with knowledge. But the teacher, Ms. Albright, overwhelmed and impatient, didn't see it that way. In the middle of Nina's passionate explanation about luciferase enzymes, the teacher interrupted her. "Nina, please shut up. You're confusing everyone. Just read the summary." Alex wasn't there, but when Nina got home, he saw the result of those words. It was as if someone had poured water on a flame. The sparkle was gone. Now, sitting in the kitchen, she just poked at the food on her plate. Alex's outburst was a silent cry of anger and helplessness. He saw his sister's brilliant project, months of work, abandoned in a box in the corner of her room. His pain was not only for his sister but for the injustice of the world, a world that so often demands that extraordinary minds fit into ordinary patterns in order to be accepted. He wondered how he could fix something that had been broken with just 2 words. Nina's parents, Inez and Robert, acted quickly. The next day, they were at school for a meeting with Mrs. Albright and the principal. The principal's office was a sterile place, decorated with trophies and certificates that seemed more important than the students themselves. Their hope was to find remorse, understanding, a solution. What they found was a lesson in crisis management. Ms. Albright apologized, but it was a rehearsed apology, empty of feeling. "I had a difficult day," she said. "The class was rowdy. I didn't use the best words. The emphasis was always on I, my difficulty, my stress, my words." Nina's pain was just collateral damage in the teacher's narrative. The principal, for his part, was a master of false empathy. He talked about the school's excellent reputation and Ms. Albright's impeccable record. He assured us that measures would be taken and that there would be talks about sensitivity. But the solution he proposed was the most cowardly of all. He suggested that, to avoid further stress for Nina, it might be best if she did not participate in the science fair that year. "We can give her top marks for her efforts," he offered, as if a grade could erase the humiliation. The message was clear. The goal was not to repair the damage done to Nina, but to hush up the incident as quickly as possible. Protecting the school's image was the priority. Inez and Robert left that room with the bitter taste of disappointment. The hope that the institution that was supposed to educate and protect their daughter really cared about her had proven to be an illusion. They offered an easy solution, a way to sweep the problem under the rug. But Nina's wound could not be covered by a rug. It was open, exposed, and the school, instead of a bandage, had offered only silence. The meeting at the school did not bring peace. On the contrary, it sparked a cold war at home. Robert, her father, a man who expressed his love through protection, was determined. "That's it. It's over," he declared that night. "She will never set foot in that science fair again." I will not let my daughter go through another public humiliation. They don't deserve her. His instinct was to build a fortress around Nina so that the world could never hurt her again. Ines, her mother, saw things differently. If we take her out now, Robert, we're saying that the teacher was right. We're teaching her that when someone tells her to shut up, she has to obey. She needs to finish what she started, for her pride. The conflict between them was a tug of war between protecting and empowering, and Nina was caught in the middle, silent. And Mrs. Albright? It would be easy to hate her, to turn her into a monster. But the reality, as always, was more gray. She wasn't a bad person. She was a teacher in her 20th year of teaching, drowning in bureaucracy, overcrowded classrooms, and pressured to perform on standardized tests. She saw dozens of students every day, each with their own needs. On that particular day, she was dealing with a throbbing headache, a warning from the principal about the class's poor performance in math, and a stack of tests to grade. In her exhausted mind, Nina's outburst was not a sign of genius, but rather another source of chaos on an already chaotic day. The "shut up" did not come from a place of calculated malice, but from deep exhaustion, a short circuit in a professional who no longer had the emotional resources to deal with anything that deviated from the script. Her mistake did not absolve her, but it made her tragically human. It was the failure of a system that demands so much from its teachers that it ends up draining them of their empathy, turning them into mere content managers, incapable of seeing the brilliant poetry in the mind of a student like Nina. While their parents argued, Alex watched his sister. Nina spent hours in her room, not with her fungi, but with a sketchbook, creating complex, repetitive patterns. It was her defense mechanism, her way of bringing order to the chaos she felt inside. Alex knew that if they forced her to give up, a part of her would be lost forever. And if they forced her to perform in the normal way, she could break. There had to be a third way. The turning point did not come in a big argument, but in a silent act of complicity between siblings. One afternoon, Alex walked into Nina's room, sat down on the floor next to her, and said nothing. He just picked up one of her project notebooks and started reading. After a long time, he said quietly, "Nina, your project is amazing. What if we showed it to them? Not with words, but with light." The idea was simple and brilliant. They would spend the next week transforming Nina's presentation. Instead of a linear speech, they created an experience. Alex used his computer skills to create a slideshow that contained no long texts, but images, animated graphics, and time-lapse videos that he helped Nina record, showing the growth of the fungi. The climax would be Nina's own lab bench, covered with a black cloth. The plan was as follows. Nina would say very little. She would give a brief introduction, and then with a remote control in her hands, she would guide the jury on a visual journey, synchronizing the images with the gradual revelation of her experiments on the bench. The speech would not be the main focus. It would just be a guide. The science, the light, the project itself would speak for her. At that moment, Alex wasn't just helping his sister with a school project. He was building a bridge over the abyss of her fear, using the materials she herself had given. Him, her passion, her logic, and her light. Nina's room was transformed into a secret laboratory of hope. Every night, they rehearsed. The first small victory came when Nina, for the first time, managed to get through the entire presentation without stuttering or freezing up. She was in control, not of the words, but of the images, of the rhythm. She didn't need to look at faces, just at the light emanating from the projector and her fungi. A small smile, the first in days, appeared on her face. The second and perhaps most important victory came the night before the fair. They decided to do a dress rehearsal in the living room for their parents. Robert, her father, sat on the couch, still skeptical and worried, ready to cancel everything at the slightest sign of distress from his daughter. Nina began. She said her few introductory sentences, and then the light show began. The complex images of the cellular structure of fungi appeared on the wall, the graphs showing the chemical reaction of luciferase danced in sync with the soft music Alex had chosen. And on the counter, Nina, with precise and silent gestures, revealed each step of her experiment. Robert stood silently, mesmerized. For the first time, he wasn't seeing his daughter's difficulty in speaking, but the genius of her mind in action. He was understanding the complexity of her work in a way that no speech could have explained. When the lights came on, he looked at Inez, then at Alex, and finally at Nina. With a trembling voice, he said only one thing: "My daughter, you are brilliant." At that moment, Nina didn't just win her father's approval. She helped him cross the bridge Alex had built. She brought him into her world, and he finally saw the beauty that was there. The family was united again, no longer in conflict, but as a team, ready for the battle ahead. For Nina, science was never a list of facts to memorize. It was a symphony. The periodic table was not a grid of elements. It was a keyboard with 118 notes, each with its own color and tone. Photosynthesis was a choreography of light and matter, and biophosphorescence, her project, was the most beautiful song of all. It was the silent song that life itself sang in the dark. She didn't think in words. She thought in patterns, connections, systems. Her mind was like a galaxy full of ideas moving at high speed, forming constellations of knowledge. The challenge was to translate this immensity into the linear and slow language of humans. Speaking was like trying to empty the ocean with a dropper. It was frustrating. That's why she spoke fast, why she jumped around, trying to show the vastness all at once. When Mrs. Albright said, "Shut up," Nina didn't just feel ashamed. She felt as if someone had entered her galaxy and turned off all the stars. The command was not just for her mouth, but for her mind. It was an order to stop thinking, stop connecting, stop being. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was a vacuum. Now, rehearsing with Alex, she discovered something new. She didn't need the dropper. She could just open the floodgates and let people see the ocean. The visual presentation was her true voice. Every image, every graph, every fungus glowing in the dark was a word in her native language. She was no longer hiding behind science. She was using science to reveal herself. The fair was no longer about proving her teacher wrong. It was about showing the world and herself the beauty of her own silent song. The school gym was noisy, a chaos of students, parents, and judges with clipboards and serious expressions. Nina's table was the only one covered with a black cloth, a mystery amid volcanoes made of baking soda and models of the solar system. When her name was called, a tense silence fell over her family. Mrs. Albright was there at the back of the gym, watching with an unreadable expression. Nina walked to the front, picked up the microphone, and with a slightly trembling but clear voice, said, "My name is Nina, and I want to show you the music of light." She pressed the button on the remote control. The lights in the gym dimmed, and the first image appeared on the screen. The audience, previously restless, fell silent. What followed was not a performance. It was a spell. Nina did not speak. She directed. With precise clicks, she guided the audience through a visual journey to the heart of life. The images were stunningly beautiful, the science complex, but presented in such an intuitive way that everyone could understand. And then the grand finale. Nina, in a dramatic gesture, pulled the black cloth from her bench. In the darkness of the gymnasium, dozens of colonies of fungi glowed with a spectral green light, forming patterns she had cultivated. It looked like a piece of the starry sky on the table. A collective gasp swept through the gym. The judges, who had been writing on their clipboards, were now standing, leaning over the table, amazed. They began to ask questions, and Nina, now in her element, surrounded by her light, answered. Not hurriedly, but with a calmness and authority that no one expected. When the head judge picked up the microphone, his voice was heavy with emotion. "In 20 years of judging science fairs," he said, "I've never seen anything like this. This isn't a project, it's art, it's groundbreaking." And then he began to applaud. Alone, at first, then the other judges, and then the entire gym rose to its feet. A wave of sound, a standing ovation that swept through the place. Nina looked at her family, at her brother Alex, who was crying and smiling at the same time, and she saw Mrs. Albright, in the back, standing with tears in her eyes, applauding too. It wasn't pity, but respect, that she finally understood. Nina hadn't just won the science fair. She had taught everyone a new language. The most important voice in your life is not the one coming out of your mouth, but the one echoing in your mind. Never underestimate the power of a quiet mind. It may just be composing a symphony. If this story has illuminated something within you, if it has made you believe in the power of authenticity, show your support. Like, comment, share your story, and subscribe.